Hi, it's Tom again, and in this video, we're going to continue with the CardBox tutorial, and we're going to talk about a few extra methods, and as well as including some events. So this is our plan so far. We currently have a constructor, a default constructor for the CardBox class, but we're going to look at having another option, being able to create a CardBox object dynamically and specify a link to a card that it can use. Okay, so that's another version of the constructor that we'll create. We've already dealt with this with the update card image method that we use whenever one of the properties changes. It resets what the image is. So that one's pretty much done for us. And then also in our plan was to override the toString method for the control. So we'll do that as well. Now, in terms of events, there were three sort of things I wanted to deal with in the tutorial. One of them was simply dealing with creating an event handler for an event that happens just like a form application. So what we're going to do is we're going to, as an example, use the load method. So when the control is loaded, okay, that will cause the load event to happen, and we'll have an event handler that will set the initial image for the control. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a click event for the CardBox control. Now this is a little bit of a different thing, where the load method is an event handler inside the control. Click will actually be an event. So we'll look at how that works. When the user clicks on the picture box that's part of the CardBox control, I want this click event to fire off. Card flipped is same sort of idea. The difference being is that we would expect a control to have a click event. This card flipped is a completely, it's an event that's completely unique to our control. Okay, so it's very specific to our control. So just yet another example. Okay, I want card flipped to that event to be raised whenever the face up property actually changes. So we're going to go back to the set of the face up property to look at what we need to do there. So let's look at some code. So in the break between the last video and now, I've added a few regions. I also, just for your information, went back and changed the card image names a little bit so that the black Joker was actually the black Joker and the red Joker was actually the red Joker. So I fixed that problem behind the scenes. But anyways, these two other regions, this is where I'm going to put my events and event handlers, and this is where I'll put the other methods that we're going to deal with. I think the other method that we've talked about doing now is just the override of the toString. First, let's look at the default constructor we have. So anytime we create a CardBox control, okay, now in Designer we just drag it over and we can manipulate the properties to whatever we want. But if we wanted to create one dynamically in code, basically we don't have any options to specify the parameters. What we get is a new playing card, okay, the Ace of Hearts apparently, and it's vertical. So we would create the playing card and then we would go through the process of changing the properties afterwards, and that's okay, I guess. But we could create a constructor, a parameterized constructor that might be useful to us as well. So my parameterized constructor takes a card, which is going to be what we're going to use to set the underlying card object, playing card object. I should change that because card is not the name of the class. Okay, as well as an orientation. Okay, and by default it's vertical. Okay, it's more likely to be vertical than not. So if it's not specified, that's what we get. So again, I initialize the component. That's normal. My orientation, rather than being set to vertical explicitly, it's set to this orientation parameter. Okay. By the way, this enumeration is available in System Windows Forms. Okay, it's one of the .NET enumerations already built in. And then again, rather than setting my card to a new card, I'm going to set it to this parameter, okay, which is called card. So when I run this, it's not easy for me to demonstrate to you that particular constructor, but maybe later on in an application, we could test it out in a client application where we explicitly call that constructor. But I thought I'd just include that. So we've got CardBox initialization taken care of. We've already done the update card image, so let's deal with toString. So I'll put that in my other methods area. The toString method is pretty straightforward because I already have a toString method that's part of the playing card. So what I'll do is I'll just have the control return the result from the playing card toString. So there we are, toString override system.object.toString. It returns the name of the card as a string, and literally I return my card.toString. So very, very straightforward. So let's next deal with and again, that method, by the way, the toString method, that's something I'm going to have to test in a client application. Running the project now will not allow me to actually test that out. I'll collapse that region. I'm done with my other methods for the moment. And we'll start dealing with events and event handlers. The first event that we'll deal with is the load event. So this is actually not creating an event for our control, but rather an event handler for our control, meaning I want something to happen when the picture box is clicked on. Okay, so we'll add that in. I just have to go into designer view. Actually, sorry, we'll deal with the load first. So let me call up the properties here, and let's pin them to make it a little bit easier. Okay, when I click on the control, I can't help but click on the picture box, so I need to switch that to the actual background of the control. I'll switch over to events here, and I want to add a load event. Okay, so I locate load in the list, and I'll just double click there. Okay, it didn't put it where I want it to go, so I'm just going to move it a little bit here. Okay, so there's my framework. I can actually turn that off now. My function stub for CardBox load. Okay, so this is my event handler. Okay, so when the CardBox control is actually loaded, all I really needed to do is update the card image. Okay, that's something I can actually test by running the control container here. So we can see right off the bat, when it loads up, it's already showing me an image, which is exactly what I needed it to do. So next is the click event. I go back to my design here, and I've selected the picture box. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to, if the user clicks on the picture box, because it's completely masking in the control because it's docked in it, so you can't actually click on the control directly. But if they click on the picture box, I want that to be treated as if they clicked on the control. Okay, so I'm going to add a click event handler for the picture box. Okay, so again, there's my my little stub for it. I'll move it up to where I want it to go. And let's add some documentation. So now the question is, what do I want this event handler to actually do? And really the answer to that question lies in the client application. So in the client application, perhaps clicking on the card means that we want to select the card for throwing it in or playing it. Or perhaps clicking the card means that we want to begin dragging it somewhere, or perhaps it means flip it over or rotate it. Who knows? We don't know that at this point. What we want to do is we just simply want to raise an event. Okay, so we'll go through the steps of doing that. The first step is to create a delegate for the event. Okay, so it's new, so it's hiding the user control class click event handler delegate. Public, it is an event, and it uses the delegate system event handler. Okay. Basically, what's going to happen here is in the client application, when they use the control, they can set up a click event. That method that they create will be linked to this delegate, and that'll give us the ability to actually invoke it. So the code to making that happen we'll put inside of picture box click. Basically what I want to say is if there's an event handler in the client application that handles clicking on the control, let's call it. So if my delegate, which is called click, is not equal to null, okay, that means that the application that we're using the control in is actually set a click event handler, then I want to call it. So I'm going to call it using the delegate name, and I'm just saying the sender is this particular control. Event arguments, I'm just passing them along. There's nothing really in the event arguments that I need to worry about, but any rate. So that actually creates the click event for my control. So we'll have to test that out in a test application as well. Next up is dealing with the flipped event. So again, I create the event, okay, by establishing in a delegate. I've called the delegate card flip. So that's what the event will look like when I put it into the client application and I set the event handler for card flipping. That's what it'll actually say. Okay, now this one isn't, I don't use the keyword new. I'm not hiding anything in the base class here. This is a completely unique event. There's nothing in design view here that I can sort of attach that to. Where I'm actually going to determine whether the card flipped or not is in the face up set property. So I'm going to go back into my properties and I'm going to revisit what's going on here in face up. So I'm going to remove my old code, and just to save you watching me typing, I'll paste this in here. When I go into set now, what I want to do is I want to determine whether the card flipped or not. So I'm going to look at the card face up property, and if it's not equal to the value, that means that the card's actually flipping over, one way or the other. It's either face up is true and value is false, or face up is false and value is true. But this is basically what's detecting that flipping is happening. So I update my face up property for my card to the value. I don't bother doing that outside because it would be setting it to the same thing. I update my card image the same way that I did it before. And then this is the part which raises the event. So similar to how I dealt with clicked, if the client application has an event handler defined for the card flipped event, okay, or card flipped is not equal to null, then what I want to do is I want to actually call that. So I use the delegate name. I'm passing it this as the sender object. And because I don't have any event arguments to pass through, I just simply make some new event arguments and I accept the default. There's nothing really I need to send along to that. Okay, so that will actually call in the whatever event handler is in the client application. Okay, it's just slightly different than how we dealt with click, but closely related. So at this point, we've got a few things that we can't necessarily test by just running the test container. So in the next video, what we'll do is we'll actually create a test application where we'll use one of these controls and actually call some of these methods. Thanks very much.